ahead next, Nicole. We will not have an official Research to Practice Institute this summer. Once again, it is so very difficult at this point to plan more than a week ahead. Can everybody hear me? Somebody just said that they could not. Nicole, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we will be offering some trainings throughout the summer and in conjunction with some other offices at the department. And we will be adding to our learning management system courses. So any teacher in need of recertification credit or just that has an interest in some of the LMS courses that we will be able to get up and started, will be able to access that. What we will offer this summer is the CPI Train the Trainer. We are working with CPI to see how we can do that. If you remember, last summer we were able to do the virtual portion first, and then districts had to get the face-to-face done following the virtual. What we would prefer is that you use your slots per district for recertifying people, and rather than training new trainers, but we're working to transition the CPI instruction from just an OSIS supported project to an agency-wide supported project. When we look at data, and this probably won't be a surprise to any of you, the majority of students that when you look at the extreme with restraint, that extreme, the majority of students that are being restrained in school settings are not students with disabilities. And school mental health, behavioral support are things that you've heard the entire agency talk about. So this will probably be the last summer that we sponsor this specifically, as in the Office of Special Ed Services, but our intention would be that in the future this will be more of an agency-wide supported initiative. Okay, next one. For spring admin, during our regularly scheduled quarterly meeting on April the 27th, we will expand that meeting to 4 hours and have a virtual spring administration conference. And we will at that point talk about the differentiated monitoring and support that is going on. As you know, South Carolina was lucky enough to be chosen in the first round of states to be monitored with this new system from the Office of Special Education Programs. Our on-site, and that's in quotations because it will depend on what our COVID rates are like in November, but our on-site visit will be in November of 22. At this time, we don't anticipate any on-site LEA visits, but as with all things special ed, that is subject to change. We will also be talking about the upcoming data manual, and then the LEA determinations and system of tiered assistance, or SOTA, process. Okay. A reminder as we transition into talking about our state performance plan annual performance report indicators. The last 2 years, our state numbers, not surprisingly, for indicator 11, which is 60-day timeline for initial evals, and indicator 12, which is BabyNet to Part B transition, have continued to drop. We know that district schools and communities have continued this year to move back and forth. When I say this year, I'm talking about the data that's reflected on our upcoming APR, which will be the 2021 data. And we know that last school year, and again this year, districts, schools, and communities have continued to move back and forth from face-to-face to virtual to hybrid. But the Office of Special Education Programs is still not providing any waivers for any of those timelines or anything else related to IDEA. And we will start working with districts to try to develop some procedures to ensure that timelines can be met despite COVID-related issues like quarantine, absences, closures, because I think whereas when we went into this almost 2 years ago now, we thought this would be over soon. I think we are, even those of us who are who need to be wrapped in the head with a hammer, are realizing at this point that this is not going away anytime soon. Okay, and I think I'm turning it over to Jill and Sandy, maybe.
Hi, everybody. I am going to go ahead and do this slide. And I just wanted to let everybody know that what the timelines and processes will be for indicators 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. This year we lumped them all together to kind of give everybody some grace because the beginning of the school year and the end of last year was so crazy. But we're going to be going back to our regular timelines for these indicators this year. So the timelines, just as a reminder, are indicators 4, 9, and 10 will come back around in May. Indicators 11 and 12 will come back around in September, and indicator 13 will come around in January. But for now, we have all of those indicators going out together this week. So I wanted to let you guys know that they'll all be on one letter. So you'll get, there'll be a little chart and it'll have the indicator on the left side of the chart. There'll be, the middle column will say findings and then the right column will say comments. So it'll have the indicator, if you were, if you met the trigger for indicator 9 and you sent your self-assessment in and all was good, you'll see cleared there. And then the comment will say like no further action. But let's say that you were not cleared and you're non-compliant, then it'll say non-compliant and then it'll give you a comment will tell you what your further action is that you need to do to correct that. Just for 11 and 12, you'll see if you're non-compliant, you'll see the percentage because I know that's important and people like to know what their percentage was. But if you have any questions at all about what your letter says, please reach out to your cohort manager and they're going to kind of be the middle person and then they'll send it to the correct team that's working on those indicators. So you don't have to try to remember which team is working on 4, which is working on 13 and so forth. So if you have any questions, just let them know. One thing I did want to note is if you are found to be systemic, and that'll be listed on your sheets, on your letter, so it'll either say individual or systemic. If you're systemic, you'll then work with your cohort manager to develop an action plan to address that issue, that systemic issue, and you'll add it to your QUIP. So let's say you don't have a QUIP, then you'll develop a QUIP. You and your cohort manager will develop a QUIP, and that's kind of our way of tracking what the issue is and what are your steps going to be to correct that issue. As always, you have to make sure that all of these are corrected as soon as possible, but no later than 1 year. And then you'll submit all that evidence through ADT. So anybody who did the self-assessments and indicator 13 already knows how to use ADT. That's where you will go ahead and upload any evidence such as PWNs, compensatory service plans, or any other kinds of evidence that you have to submit to get cleared. Once we look over your evidence and we approve it and all is good, we'll send you a clearance letter out so that you know that you're cleared and you're all good to go.
And then so I saw in the comments the question about moving that April date. We will discuss it and have to come back. We definitely can't make a decision right now. The problem is it falls in the middle of a lot of stuff. So there is just so much going on that it's hard to, we're seeing the effect right now. We kind of slowed things down for the with all of the indicators last year to give everybody a break. And now we're kind of paying for it a little bit right now by killing you guys just a little bit, and then going to have to turn around and do some more things with 9 and 10 right away again at the end of the year. And with that in mind, we need to look at DMS and when OSEP is coming. Remember, this is when they are coming to do our on-site. So all of those letters and all of those findings that are going out, the primary objective in their review, in their visit, has to do with, are we issuing findings and how are we clearing those findings? So all of those things that Sandy just discussed that the office is getting ready to send out have high likelihood of being reviewed by OSEP as well, and looking at the timeliness of the correction and how those were reviewed and how those were cleared. So do keep in mind, as you are getting those letters, it's a good idea to try to move those corrections along fairly quickly. You do have ASAP Bingle Toy as soon as possible to have been no case longer than a year. However, do know that they have a high probability, OSEP has a high probability of looking at those come June in our visit. So keep that in mind as you're working to clear through all of those. And they do conduct LEA interviews. We aren't anticipating anything on site, but we are anticipating quite a few LEA interviews. And those interviews are going to talk about policies and procedures. And Spring Admin is going to assist to help you be able to answer any of those questions that you may be asked, because as we bring new stuff out, we're going to talk about the LEA determinations and the FAQ that we sent out about that. And then we're also going to talk about the data manual. Those are two big pieces that are going to come up during DMS, and we're about to talk about both of those now.
Good afternoon. As Nicole stated, one of the things that we have to do to prepare for this upcoming audit is to have a data manual prepared. And so as a part of that process, we are soliciting your feedback in those areas. One, on Monday, I plan to send the manual out. And if you have time, I know that there's a million and one things going on, but we really would appreciate if you could provide some feedback to us on whether or not it's clear, and does it provide adequate content on the process, and do you follow the SPP APR methodology? So we're just looking for clarity on the data manual as it pertains to processes and content, and I plan to send those out if Becky and Nicole gives me the green light on Monday to send that out. And if you would just provide your feedback to myself so that I can start compiling those things. Once again, in advance, I truly appreciate everyone who will provide feedback to us in advance. So thank you.
All right, I believe this is Lisa. Are you available?
If I unmuted myself, that would help, as I'm talking away to myself. But been a long time coming to get to this point, but the new draft of the SEED is out. It's on our website. It's on our Edmodo site as well. You know, the process to get to this rollout, there was just so much for us to consider. You know, SCASP, our South Carolina Association of School Psychologists, they were instrumental as a stakeholder group for many of the disability categories. Robert Hill, Marty McKenzie, they worked with their own stakeholder groups regarding the hearing and vision categories. LaShawn Thomas Bridges started the SLI criteria with her stakeholder group. And Angie Neal came in and she worked with that group, and they made some final revisions to that category. These folks were just critical in our process. You know, we also brought, if you remember back to when we did have live and in-person director admin, spring and fall admin, we brought in Dr. Fletcher from University of Houston. And he did work with us and give us some guidance regarding our SLD criteria. We held sessions at Research to Practice for feedback, which really was instrumental in helping us understand the criteria from a district and an implementation perspective. You know, we also wanted to ensure with the criteria that we were staying away from low value practices, staying away from pseudoscientific practices that aren't grounded in science. There's a Latin phrase that, you know, in psychology, we kind of ad populum fallacy, which is the belief that a technique that is widely used must be valid or effective. And we really wanted to stay away from just because it's popular, it must be good. We really looked at valid, reliable research in our decision making. But first and foremost, we did take into account as we drafted this new criteria that, you know, we're doing what was best for the students of South Carolina. So the draft is on our website. It's right underneath the 2011 seed. And as soon as I'm done talking, I'll put the link in there. You can also get it on the Edmodo site. There's also a side-by-side document that kind of gives you the 2011 criteria side by side with the 2022, so you can kind of see what the differences between the two are. And you know, of course, the autism being one that's hugely different, because back then we had Asperger's, autism, PDD, NOS, and now, you know, we're autism spectrum disorder as one area. So, and some other changes. For the most part, I think that, you know, most of your teams and your districts will be able to just take the criteria and go with it without, you know, any significant training. There is a link in FormStack, and the link is on the website. It's also in the Edmodo, on Edmodo, for you to access if you want to leave comments, questions about the criteria. You can use the link as many times as you want. It allows for 5 comments. So if you have additional comments, you can just open another form and fill it out. We hope that they're good comments, but we really want your honest comments. We're going to take questions and comments until mid-March. The regulation process for us will start in April, so that'll give us a little time to consider all those comments and make any changes that we might want to do.
And Lisa, you said we want good comments. We want constructive comments.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Thanks.
Yeah. Not
we
that,
want
that
good comments.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but
Constructive
I mean,
comments that would truly be beneficial to helping us look at or implement, helping you implement these.
Yes, absolutely. And we want honest comments. You know, if there's, you know, something in any of the criteria that you don't, you know, think is workable, doable, you have suggestions, you know, we do want those, you know, and we want really honest feedback and not immediate. I mean, we do want immediate feedback when you look at it, but the reason that, you know, we're saying we'll take comments for 6 weeks, you know, we have to go to the regulation process in April, so we'll have to have a final version in April. But, you know, you can start using the criteria immediately if you want. There's a lot of districts, you know, that are using our LD criteria, you know, using a more of a response to intervention model already that can go right into that model. And there are districts that aren't even close. So, you know, just a note that the SLD, don't want anybody to panic, will not be required until July of 27. So that's 5 years for us to move toward that intervention model. It's going to give us some time to provide additional supports and to provide any additional training that we need to do. Hopefully those when you go into that FormStack document to leave comments and questions, leave comments or about what type of training you feel that your district would need, you know, to help through this transition process. You know, I've gotten quite a bit of feedback that a priority for training would be for administrators to understand, you know, that type of model for LD, and, you know, working on that currently. You know, as far as Enrich, there's going to be that transition regarding eligibility documents, and we'll be working on that this summer with our summer versioning to make changes, any changes we would need to with that. Trying to think if I am missing anything. I think that's it. I mean, look at it, give us feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback, any just suggestions that you have.
They have asked if you would share some of the districts that are already using the new criteria, or if you could.
Well, I wouldn't say like districts are using all the new criteria, but I will say, and I'm gonna call Rock Hill out and Lexington 1. They, during COVID, they did go to a SLD model that is a response to intervention based model. So they've piloting those in their districts. I know that Beaufort over the years, and maybe a few Charleston schools have used that model as well. So it may not be, you know, exactly, you know, but it's very close. What they're using is very close to what this model will look like. So they have been, you know, I've talked with Rock Hill several times, as well as going to be in Lexington 1 next week. But, you know, they've given me some feedback on, you know, what's worked for them, you know, what they may have done differently when, you know, as far as rolling it out. So any districts that do have some buildings that are working on this model, and you have some, you know, great insight as to what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and you want to share that would be awesome. I don't know that any districts have gone 100%. We've been working with USC and Scott Decker. We call it the LD project, and I know at some point he probably did get in touch with all districts, and, you know, we kind of looked at what model that most districts were using. And the interesting part was there was like no two districts were alike, no two buildings were alike. Most models were a half discrepancy, maybe a little bit RTI, maybe pattern of strength and weakness with a little bit of RTI in there. So it was very different, and it wasn't just different from district to district, it was different from building to building a lot of the time. So we're trying to, you know, have a more uniform model that works for and that is consistent throughout the state for that. I don't know if that's helpful, and like I said, and feel free to email me as well. I'll put my email in the chat, as well as the link to the website. I kind of put this at the end of the presentation because I was kind of like, you know, curiosity. Everybody's going to go to the website and see what that new criteria looks like. It's not drastic. It's not. I mean, most of the psychologists, you know, that were part of the stakeholder group, I think the concerns are with, you know, their buildings being ready to move to this type of LD model, but the other areas, you know, the changes were not that significant. But we're working with the Palmetto Literacy Project folks. You know, Act 213, you know, mandated the universal screening in K to 1 and 2, if necessary. And you know, the rollout of our statewide MTSS guides and supports, and the Palmetto Literacy Project schools are, you know, if you're tier 3 and tier 2 schools for them, you were mandated to choose from 5 specific core reading programs, and those were, I got fortunately able to be part of that team to vet those reading programs, and there are 5 of the best reading programs out there, and that's going to be very helpful to the process. So, you know, as we're rolling out new criteria, we're also rolling it out, you know, between departments so that we're aligning with early language and literacy, and hopefully districts are putting the pieces together that we'll need to make this criteria work. And we're going to help you through it. We're going to give you all the support you need. So, okay, Nicole.
Excellent. I was to say, any questions before we go to the discussion on the new LEA determinations? Lisa, do you have the chat up, or do you need me to read it off?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Enrich will be updated. Our next versioning is July, and so the criteria will go through, it'll start in April, we'll go through the regulation process. And if you're familiar, our criteria is 43 to 43.1 is where you'll find that in regulation. And it most likely, it's not going to get through that process and until July. So July 1st will be when the new criteria will be then, you know, aside from LD, you know, required by the district. So during our summer versioning, we'll get all those new updated forms in Enrich. And hopefully that works with Enrich. But that's what will be. And there'll be 2, you know, we're looking at for LD, there'll be the current form that's in there for eligibility, and there'll be the new form, because we're going to have that 5-year period where you may be working with the old form. You may have decided as a district to go to the new, totally jump in and go to the new criteria. So, you know, those 2 forms will be a choice for you to choose, you know, which one that will be. So.
Well, and Laura, for your question, if there is a specific plan, I'll let Diane address it. However, I was going to address some Enrich things that were included in our feedback for LEA determinations, so I can talk about that in a second.
And the question about the field testing, and I'm not sure that's clear. So and I guess maybe Laura Simmons, if you could clarify, maybe you could take yourself off mute and clarify.
Yeah, hey, so it was about the field testing. Monica Todder's actually texted me. I guess something was sent out. I didn't get it. But the field testing that's happening for all the kids, that if we didn't address it in the IEP, I reached out when it first came out to ask if y'all were going to put something like you did in, was it 2015, with all the change of testing so we don't have to hold meetings. But I didn't, I guess something may have come out, but I guess I didn't get it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, I believe that went out with one of the newsletters that came out through OSAS, but there was a memo with a TDA standalone field test notification and a sample letter to send out to parents, but I can forward that to you.
Would you please? Because I might have missed it somewhere along the line, because apparently I'm the only one who didn't know. So thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, doesn't look like there's any other questions, Nicole, so.
Excellent. As I say, they're searching for the link. So if you could get them,
yeah, and I'm going to
get them their link.
Yes.
So I want to thank all of you. I had sent out right before break, and I know that wasn't the greatest time, but it was kind of like well, we can either hold off and hope that they have time in January, or we got to get rolling on this. So we did send it out the week before Christmas break, and then sent another reminder the start of January. And I think that was the one that everybody actually got to, because that was when I started getting some of the feedback in. And we thank you guys that took the time to go through those. Your input was absolutely amazing. And as we kind of said, it definitely is, we're still making the sausage. So there was some grammar and some editing things that needed to be worked through, and just making sure all the tables are on the same page, and we will definitely get all of that taken care of. And the biggest thing that we wanted to be sure is if everything was clear. So those of you that had said, hey man, we need some more clarity here, this is new, so we need either some measurement tables or some formulas, we need some more stuff here. So we appreciate all of that. We will take all of the stuff you guys mentioned about clarity and refine and try to define that a little bit better. But there was a couple of big things that, and I am happy to take questions and answers right now, but I thought I'd get the ball rolling since you guys are usually a little quiet at first. So in the feedback, there was a couple of things that were stand out that I wanted to address, and people were probably like, I emailed this to her, asked questions, and she never answered us back. So my intention was to take care of it here. So yes, that document was not short, and it was on purpose that we kind of put a shorter version at front, give you a little bit of the quick and dirty as you could get when you're answering data questions. And then the second half was intended to give you details about each one of those specific things. Now, the other thing we were trying to balance is we do have a data manual coming out. So we didn't want to get so much into the data and the formulas that it made the data manual not necessary, because the data manual is going to answer not just your LEA determinations questions, but it's going to go even deeper into other stuff that you guys, all the tables that you guys are turning in, it gets into everything. Whereas this wasn't quite intended to be a data manual. It was intended to really parse through that LEA determinations and explain what they meant. We will be creating a brochure, a short video, but we wanted to make sure we got this finalized first, that you guys agreed what was in it. And the data manual is going to come out on Monday. And we did the LEA determinations has gone out and come back, and the data manual is coming out Monday. And the data manual is very much like those LEA determinations, where we are saying, we want your feedback. Tell us where we need to be more clear, or you need more information, or anything like that. Now, there was a lot of the questions came kind of around, why do you include these specific things? There are specific things that OSEP makes us include in those LEA determinations, and discipline is one of them. And the other big question around data and the discipline was, why do we look at just students with disabilities? Why don't we look at, compared to the rest of the LEA, the rest of the students in the LEA? We have to pick one or the other. And the reason that we pick doing it, let's compare it to other students with disabilities, is because our regular education peers, the way they report, the only part of information that matches up that we get from them is expulsion. So we can't, unless or until our regular education peers are reporting in the same way, we can't make those two things match. And we have to pick same across the entire state, because the SPP APR is a measurement, is a state level measurement. So we have to do the same thing across the entire state. So even if your LEA determined they wanted to report discipline or look at discipline disproportionality, we couldn't do that just for a single LEA. We would have to do it across the entire state. So the discipline piece, we agree. We would much rather it be compared to what does the rest of your LEA do? But at this point in time, we don't have a way to measure that without asking regular education to do it the same way we do and push it to us. And that is a battle that is going to be a tough one, or would be a very tough one at this point in time. Now, a lot of the feedback, I mentioned that I was going to talk about Enrich. So with Enrich, a lot of the feedback we got was related to, hey, you're pulling this stuff out of Enrich. Enrich has not been the best lately. And the OCR data, just expulsion is the only one that matches with Enrich. So our contract with Enrich is up in 2023. We believe it's May 2023. Becky, we go back and forth about what the actual day is. And we are getting ready to put out an RFI, a request for information. All of the struggles you guys are having with Enrich, we are having times 86 or 84. Either way, we feel your pain, and we are as dissatisfied as all of you are as well. And if you remember many years back, Peter Koip, when we initially put out the RFP and gathered all the stakeholder feedback, Peter has agreed to come back and help us with redoing that so we can put out an RFI. We hope to have an RFI. We hope to have it written and together by April so that it can get posted by June. And Peter we are paying him to consult with us and help us through that process because he already knows so much of the background. He lived it and knew so much of what was going on. We're going to have another 3 stakeholder meetings, and we will also be recruiting from all of you for let's get your feedback on what you would want in a potentially new system. It doesn't mean we're leaving Enrich, but it does mean we are putting out an RFI, and if they bid and are the best, we would keep them. But if not, we will not keep them. So the other part was Peter also knew who provided the greatest feedback and input last time. So he will also be reaching out to all of them. And then we will be working with ORDA, the Office of Research and Data Analysis, to help us with that RFI, because we had put things off for so long that we were trying, because we wanted to get something that that would cover both PowerSchool and Enrich, so that it was one thing, not 2 things. Oh gosh, no. And we definitely will keep in mind teacher morale and teacher shortages. But like I said, it's up in 2023. So we need a new contract, whether they're willing to stay with us at this point or not. Enrich themselves are also having some internal issues that may make it so they can't continue, because ourselves and Colorado are the only 2 states where they do the entire state. So they may not also be willing to continue to do it at a state level. Will the training options be considered for the RFI? Absolutely. That's the exact type of feedback that we need and that needs to go in there. So like I said, we have God bless Peter. I guess that's the best way I can say it. And he is going to help us through that process, because it is not easy and it's a little bit painful.
And Nicole, I wanted to add, we appreciate everyone's feedback and perspective on the issues at the district and school level for Enrich. And we do understand that when we can't extract valid and reliable data, that affects funding, not only at the school and district level, but at the state level as well. So if we're having difficulty getting valid and reliable child count numbers from districts because of Enrich, then that means we're also having difficulty getting those numbers to report to the feds, which is how our funding is based as well. We know that part of the problem with, Nicole mentioned earlier that we have pushed some things back, and some of that has been because we keep running into issues with data collection and data reporting. So we do understand, and I would encourage anyone that wants to reach out to share your concerns. We are meeting frequently with Enrich. We are meeting frequently, and the meetings typically include our director of procurement, because this is a contract issue as well, and that any decision going forward, we will make in the best interest of students and teachers and district staff. But as Nicole says, this contract will end one way or another in May of 23. And I have lived through the transition from Tranquility to Accent to Enrich. So I very well remember transitioning from one system to a completely new one. And I think we've learned a great deal just in our transition from Accent to Enrich. And one of the things we've learned is that training has to be accessible to teachers and districts, which means typically that it has to be recorded, and the training has to be provided with adult learning principles in mind, meaning that you've got short 20, 30, 45-minute sequences of training that you can refer back to very easily when there are questions that can be used over and over again, and updated when you have new staff. So all of those things we're trying to work through with this. And there had been a question about the PowerSchool and child count data, because the PowerSchool fields are not always tied to the child's primary disability, and IFA codes are a perfect example. Right now, you know that SLI, speech language impairment, is weighted higher, for example, than specific learning disability. So the child's highest weighted disability category gets put in PowerSchool as the primary disability for IFA purposes. There are just a lot of issues that relate to PowerSchool not containing at this point all of the data fields that we're required to report.
Excellent. And then one other piece in the LEA determinations that did come up that we need to let you guys know. Now, if you did the opt-in for indicator 14, you will get it this time, but that was the last opportunity for the opt-in with indicator 14. The pilot behind that, or the intention behind that, was we wanted to know if local districts, if those kids were hearing from their local districts versus from Singo, our vendor that takes care of it for us, are our response rates higher? And they really weren't. They were almost identical. So, and unless we can talk every single district into doing their own indicator 14 data, and which we know we have districts that do not have any interest whatsoever in that. In fact, the larger the district gets, the less interest they have in trying to do that. So we are going to stay with Singo, and we're going to take out the opt-in option, or opt-out or opt-in option for indicator 14 to collect your own data. So those bonus points will no longer be allowed on those LEA determinations. Now, regarding the new LEA determinations, do you guys have any questions? You will be getting your drafts in March, and we will be talking about them during spring admin and going over any of that. So you'll actually get to see how it looks for your district. But now's your opportunity. Any Q&A or anything else we've discussed today for that matter?
Nicole, this is Lisa. Can I just thinking of one more thing regarding the criteria to add. You know, I get invited to a lot of district school psych monthly meetings, so that's always a good way to talk about the criteria. You know, feel free to invite me. I know there's a lot of districts that maybe only have 1 or 2 psychologists. You know, let me know, and I'm sure when I go to another district that has, you know, a larger group, we could just, you know, that's the beauty of virtual. You know, we can just add a few more psychologists to that. if feel free to just, I put my email in the chat earlier to let me know, and I'll be glad to come and help. Thanks, Nicole.
No problem.
Nicole, this is Ann. Can I say one thing?
I don't know. Of course you can.
Okay, it's okay. I just wanted to, as we're talking about corrections of findings of noncompliance, just wanted to remind everyone that you should have received back in December the steps for completing corrective actions based on letters of resolution, indicating that if you had any questions, give us a holler. And we didn't hear from anybody, so we just wanted to remind you again. Please look back and make sure you got that just before the holidays. And if you do have any questions, just get in touch with me or with Carmen Wilm, and we'll be happy to answer anything you have. This is specific to completing corrective actions based on letters of resolution related to state level complaints. Thank you.
And who did that come from?
I think it came from either Carmen or Becky. I thought Becky sent it out. Becky, do you remember?
I think Gwen sent it out on my
Right.
behalf.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds right. And it would have been very close to your winter holidays. So we understand if it got lost in the shuffle. And if you want us just to send it again, we'll be glad to do that. We just didn't want to bombard you if you already had it.
If
And
I was,
Natasha,
if Wendy was supposed
Natasha-
to have it, she didn't have it. So I'm gonna go look and ask you to send it again, maybe.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Natasha asked about the field test letter available in Spanish. To my knowledge, it is not. We can try to. We do have a service that we use for educational translations because, as you all know, just because someone speaks Spanish does not mean that they can interpret not only the English language, but also the educational, because special ed, as you all know, has, we are our own language, and soon it will be a foreign language added to those that students can take in high school. I'm kidding about that, but we will look into getting that translated. We are trying to look at what needs to be translated and what are the high incident languages, so we can look into that.
Becky?
Yes.
This is Kristen. Just to echo Natasha on that, I think that would be really beneficial anytime you guys send out a letter such as that. If we could at least get it in Spanish. The costs that we're incurring as districts with regards to translations of, we have to translate in the top 5 languages for Horry County for anything that goes out en masse, but even the costs that we're incurring having to translate evaluations when we get information from other countries, some of those things are $6,000 a pop for one evaluation. And so in any way that you guys, if you do create something outside of course, Enrich, and we've all got our own workarounds that we've developed to try to kind of reduce some of those costs for us, like a WISC, the description of WISC, we get it translated one time, we can use that over and over and over again in our report. But at any time that you guys send that out, I think at least in Spanish, because I'm sure Spanish is in everyone's top 5.
Yeah.
I know beyond that, that might change a little bit. That really would help us as far as districts go. So
Okay, good. That's good feedback, Kristen. And we will, we've got the internal Enrich group that will, we've started going through and looking at what we've got and what we need. This was a kind of a spur of the moment letter that we did based on the need because of all the field tests that were coming up. The other, as you're thinking, the other just reminder that probably is not in your direct control, but someone in your district, please make sure that the district entity and information management system, DIMS or DEEMS, however you want to pronounce it, has up-to-date information in it. We are required to use that as our pull from to send out emails. There is a special education director's portion, and there is also a secondary contact, as well as lots of other things. And I say that because I went to send out a reminder this morning and went to Deems to download the list and realized just in looking through that there are a couple of incorrect positions that need to be updated. So please talk to whoever in your district is responsible for that and make sure that your district is keeping that up to date, because that is what we're required to use to send out information. And I did notice that Department of Juvenile Justice is not in the system, and so we probably need to talk about how to handle that.
All right, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording. Maybe.